Hey there, Bobby Klink from Your Online Genius here. I'm an intellectual property lawyer in Washington, D.C., and Your Online Genius is a company dedicated to helping online entrepreneurs protect their online businesses without having to shell out money to a high-priced lawyer like me. Instead, we provide the resources, the information, the forms, so that you can do it yourself and make sure that you are on solid footing. Today, we are continuing the theme for this week, which is podcasting. We're going to be talking about an important issue related to podcasting and legal issues that can come up with podcasting. And that's about music and how you make sure that you're not going to get yourself in trouble with the music you choose for your podcast. Before we talk about that, though, I wanted to remind you there is an epic blog post we put up this week. It's about 4,500 words. It's on our website, youronlinegenius.com/blog, and you can find it. In that, you'll find a bunch of information about what we're talking about throughout the week in these lives. You'll also be able to download a free checklist of the issues you need to make sure you're thinking about from a legal perspective when you launch a podcast. So I hope you'll do that. Make sure you get all the information you need. And now at this point, let's go ahead and jump into the subject matter today. Like I said, today we're talking about music and how that plays into a podcast, how you can use it, etc. Now, I don't know about you, but I love listening to podcasts. And there's some that are in my regular rotation that I listen to all the time. But then there's, I cycle things through. And the way I do that is I'll often just kind of scroll through iTunes or search through based on keywords. I tend to search, obviously, for things related to online entrepreneurship because that's what I'm interested in and that's what I really want to learn. And when I'm doing it, I don't really pay attention to who it is or whatever. I'll just, try one and see, hey, do I like this? And there have been plenty of times when I'm doing that and I come across a relatively obscure podcast. Never heard of it, never heard of the people. They're not big names in the industry. No one you know of, but they probably have some good followers, their own dedicated followers. And you'll discover that, or often I discover, I'm listening, I'm like, hey, I know that music. And, I will hear their intro music or their bump music or their outro music. And we're talking, it is a legitimate top 10 hit. Think of whoever you think is, a big star now, and they'll have music from that person playing in the beginning. And I'm sitting there and saying, there is no way that they should be using this music. Because the problem is, to use music in your podcast, you have to have permission to do so. And that's because music is covered by copyrights. Actually, it's normally going to be covered by at least 2 copyrights, but it could be even more. There is a copyright that attaches to the written music. And by written music, I'm not talking about lyrics. I'm talking, the score. When you kind of write out the score of music, that is protected by a copyright. Also, the lyrics can be protected. But then there's a separate copyright that attaches to the performance. So in a typical band situation, if the band, for example, if there's 1 or 2 people who writes all the music and then they record it, well, the writers will have their copyright, and then the band as a group will have a copyright over the recording because they were all involved. Again, that will often get transferred to a certain person or to a certain entity, but whoever holds those copyrights has the exclusive right to decide when that music can be played, especially for commercial use. But, they control the ability to do that. And so you have to have permission from whoever it is who holds that right to be able to use the music in your podcast. And that is, the permission is called a license. That's the word that has just been used by intellectual property lawyers for pretty much all intellectual property to give you permission to use my asset. It's called a license. Now, I get asked this question all the time when I'm on podcasts and when I'm talking to online entrepreneurs. There seems to be this misconception that there's an exception to copyright law if you only use a little bit of it. The most common misconception I've heard is that the 7-second rule. If you use 7 seconds or less of music, you're fine. You don't have to worry about copyright. But I've heard things from 5 seconds to 30 seconds. I've heard all kinds of lengths. All of it's wrong. It doesn't matter how short you play. If you play a recognizable portion of a song, that will be copyright infringement if you don't have permission to do it. There's a common, or I'm going to date myself with this example, but there's an example I can give you. It's in a different context, but back in the, I guess, late 80s, early 90s, you might have heard of a musician called Vanilla Ice, and he had a very popular song, Ice Ice Baby. And the hook to that, which was, I think, 3 notes, so very short period of time, was very much like an old song. And so there was an argument, there was a lawsuit. I mean, in that case, because it wasn't identical, there was kind of an argument that they had kind of tweaked it just a little bit. But so that's the point. 3 notes can be enough to be a copyright infringement. So there's no exception for using only a little bit of a song. So don't fall for that. If someone tells you that, you should ignore them. You might also want to explain to them they're wrong, but at least for your sake, don't believe them. So you can't just go and grab your CD or grab your MP3 players and pick a song from there and use it on your podcast. That's not allowed. So what should you do instead? You need to find music that you have a license to. And there are really 3 ways to do it. 1, you could try to get a license to popular music, but let me explain to you, that's going to be a long process and it's going to be an expensive process. To do that, what you have to do is figure out who holds the right to license it, who's the licensing authority. There's some agencies out there that have the rights to a lot of music. I think, for example, Sony Music, they have the right to license most of theirs, but there are different agencies. I have some friends who are musicians who had a what's called a publishing agent who had the right to license their music. But so you have to figure out who has the licensing authority. And then you have to go to them and negotiate a deal. And if you were going for a top 10 type of hit, you're probably going to be talking about thousands of dollars for a single song to get a license. I don't know about you, but I think I'd rather spend thousands of dollars elsewhere on my business. And if I have a podcast, I'm going to spend that on probably marketing or a bunch of other things instead of licensing a single song to be used. And of course, if it's popular music, if you're licensing a song that's popular today, I mean, a year from now, it may be gone, or it may date you if you use that. So I wouldn't go that route, but if you want to, that's what you need to do. The next source is there are websites that offer royalty-free music, and you're going to pay a fee, but it's going to be a one-time fee that's generally pretty reasonable. And what the word royalty-free is that means you're not going to have to pay a royalty on every download or every time you play it. No, you pay one fee up front and you have the right to use it forever. You need to check the license, but that's normally what it's going to mean. So there's a bunch of those websites out there. You can search for these things. In the blog post that I put up this week, you can find that information. I think I listed 4 or 5 of them. I personally never used them. I've searched around. I've listened to it. You can search by theme, mood, feeling. So there's a lot of ways to search, and you can find music that way, and it'll be royalty free. You download it, and then you can use it. So that's one way to go, and probably the best way to go if you're just in the normal world and just a typical person, and you don't have access to the third way. The third way is if you happen to have friends who are musicians. This can be the holy grail in a sense, because if you have some good friends who are willing to do it for you, you can get them to record some music, right? Record music that really fits exactly what you're going for in terms of theme, in terms of feel, in terms of all that. And on top of that, that no one else will have it. That's the problem of using these royalty-free sources is chances are there's going to be someone else out there using the same music. Again, I don't think that's a big deal, but it's pretty cool if you have music that's just yours and that no one else can use. When I launch my podcast, that's actually what I'm going to do, because I have a bunch of friends who are musicians. I have a friend who's a voiceover artist, so I have a lot of these advantages that I'll be able to get that done by friends, but done professionally. So it's going to be really good. But let me give you a piece of advice that you have to take care of when you do that. If you have a friend write a song for you and record a song for you, remember, they own the copyright. Your friend does, or the band, whoever records it for you. And if they just say, here, use it, if you don't have a written agreement, you can run into trouble down the line. Let's say you blow up and it becomes a hugely popular podcast and you're getting hundreds of thousands of downloads. All of a sudden, your good friend may come back and say, well, I think I ought to get a piece of this. I think I ought to get 10 cents a download, or they'll just come up with some number. And you may end up in a fight about it. So what you need to do, if you have a friend do it, you need to get a written license agreement signed before you start using it. It's pretty simple. You don't have to do anything great or fantastic. You just need a written document where they grant you the permission to use the music forever for your podcast. Again, if it's a good friend, they're probably going to do it for some nominal charge, or maybe even for free, or whatever. A case of beer, I think, is what I could probably pay a lot of my friends to do it, because we're close friends. But get that agreement in place, or otherwise you can run into trouble. So we talked about what you can't do, and we talked about what you should do. The next question is, what happens if you don't listen to me and you go out and start using popular music in your podcast? Well, again, you probably can remember the beginning of a video. Let's say it's a Blu-ray, or a DVD, or a VHS, or if you're old like me, a Betamax tape. But at the beginning of all those videos, you might know there's that FBI warning. That's about copyright. If you infringe someone's copyright, number one, you're committing a federal crime. You're probably not going to get prosecuted. You're not going to get thrown in jail for it. But if you blow up and become popular, what's going to happen is the owner of that copyright is going to come after you and demand that you pay them money. And they may also say, and I want you to stop using it in the future because, for example, I don't like the message. I don't want to be associated with whatever your message is, if they don't like it for some reason. So then all of a sudden you're going to have to pay them a bunch of money for having used it in the past. They might claim something based on every download or some other basis. And then you're going to have to stop using it and use something different. So you don't want to fall into into that trap. And the problem is, it's going to come up when it's a big deal, not when it's a little deal. They're going to find out about it once you're big, once there have been a lot of downloads, once you've been using it for a while. And so they're going to claim a pretty big damage coming out of it. So you just don't do it. It's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe to get yourself in big trouble down the line. So instead, you need to make sure that you get licensed music from one source or another. So that's it. Again, just remember, you can't just take music. You've got to get licensed music from the right place. If you do that, you'll be fine. That's the lesson for today. Again, remember, there's that epic blog post that you can find more information and a checklist where you can get some really good information about podcasting and the law and what you need to know. Also, if you like what you're learning here generally, I have a broader course about the 5 mistakes that online entrepreneurs make that can doom their business. And so that is a great resource for you to really learn these ins and outs of some of the biggest mistakes I see. And you can get access to that at mistakes.youronlinegenius.com. Again, mistakes.youronlinegenius.com. You go there, you sign up, you'll get 5 lessons for free, emailed to you, but you also get the ability, if you want, to just go access them all right away and go through the information and learn what you need to know and what you need to avoid. So I hope you've enjoyed today. That's it. We'll see you tomorrow, where, again, we're going to be talking about podcasting and the law and diving into another issue. So we'll see you tomorrow.